Bottling is the transfer of wine from a barrel or tank into glass bottles that are then sealed. The purpose of bottling is to make sure the wine is protected. When it is opened by a wine drinker far, far away from the winery where it was made, it is still in good condition. Before we look at the details of bottling, there are one or two final processes that may occur before the winemaker puts the wine into bottles. These next steps are optional and will depend on the style of wine being made and, more importantly, the volume. These are fining, filtration, and cold stabilization, all of which are aimed at making more stable wines to be bottled. First, let's look at cold stabilization. Can you remember learning about tartaric acid? It's that wonderful acid that makes wine taste fresh and vibrant. Well, tartaric acid has the habit of forming crystals in wine. You may have seen them in white wines before. They can either look like big pieces of sugar or finer, whiter, powdery crystals. Even though these crystals are totally tasteless and harmless, many people don't like them in their wine. To make sure that no crystals will form in the wine, it is placed in a big, cool tank, and then the wine is chilled to just above 0 degrees. Some tartrate crystals are added to the wine, which will help form more and more crystals. Once all the crystals are formed, they can be filtered out. If a customer you are serving ever spots some tartrates in their wine, you can assure them that they are perfectly safe and natural. There is also the chance that there are little tiny particles left in the wine at this time. Most of these are harmless, but many winemakers do not want to take the risk of anything ruining their final wines. To make absolutely sure, winemakers can now either fine and filter their wine. Let's start with fining. Fining is simply pouring certain powders or liquids into the wine that are of a higher density and will sink to the bottom of the tank, taking the unwanted particles with it. The wine is then racked again, leaving the fining material and particles behind. The winemaker can also pass the wine through a filter. A filter is a series of porous pads that the wine is forced through under pressure. The pores, or tiny, tiny holes in the pads, allow the wine to pass through but will stop any leftover yeast or bacteria in the wine. If there are bacteria or yeast left in the wine, it might start to ferment again on a supermarket shelf or in a restaurant cellar. By working in a clean and sterile cellar and making wine in small volumes, winemakers are able to make wines that do not need to be fined or filtered. The worry winemakers have with fining and filtering wines is that although they might be taking out bad stuff, they could also be stripping the wine of valuable flavor compounds. Now the wine is ready for its final step, bottling. Bottling can be done in a few ways. Big wineries will have their own bottling line, while smaller wineries sometimes make use of a mobile bottling unit. This is a truck with a bottling machine on it which travels from winery to winery. Some wineries even bottle by hand. All methods do the same job. They get the wine into a bottle and seal it. The common thread is to try and protect the wine from being exposed to too much oxygen. Bottled wines need a little bit of oxygen so that they are able to develop in the bottle, but not so much that they oxidize. The biggest decision winemakers face when bottling their wines is whether to use a cork or a screw cap. Wines that are meant to be cellared or aged for many years are normally closed with a cork. The corks are made from a bark of a cork tree that are excellent stoppers for wine bottles, as the cork pushes against the bottle, creating an excellent seal. The problem with corks is that they may contain bacteria that can get into the wine and give it a musty or wet cardboard smell. And these wines are said to be corked. Another problem with corks is that top quality corks are expensive, making them less ideal for cheaper wines. The other method is to use a screw cap. The screw caps have been used since the 1960s and have taken a large share of the market. While many cheap wines are closed using screw caps, it doesn't mean that if a wine has a screw cap, it is necessarily cheap. It is a decision that winemakers need to make. But if the wines are bottled correctly, the closure should not have an effect on the flavor of the wine. The benefit of screw caps is that the wine will not be corked. But many people today still love the experience of a cork. Now that we have a finished wine, in the next lesson we are going to learn about the different categories of flavor that are found in them: primary, secondary, and tertiary flavors.